Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today, we're going to be taking a look at community colleges and the unique role they play in helping to advance students and to provide excellent educational backgrounds. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Dr. Magdalena de laTeja previously served as the Vice President for Student Development Services at Tarrant County College, Northeast Campus in Texas. She was a teacher, served as a Dean of Student Services at Austin Community College, practiced law with the Texas legislature, and was an administrator at the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. Dr. Magdalena de laTeja, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
I appreciate you being with me after this impressive resume. I have to ask you, what do you do in your spare time? This is just remarkable, absolutely remarkable, but we're going to get into it very shortly. But let's talk at the beginning about community colleges. And as I understand community colleges, the ones I've been involved with in Kentucky and other states, they're usually two-year institutions. Normally the students live at home or near the campus. I'm not going to say always at home. Before, years ago, they were just viewed as really, I'm not going to say an inferior education, but one that if you couldn't get into a four-year institution or didn't want to go there, you would go to a two-year college, or you went there first to the community college and then went to a four-year institution. But first off, is that an accurate description, what I gave you? And secondly, how is that role changing? I think community colleges are viewed much more importantly today than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I think that that's a fair question, and the community colleges, I believe, have evolved over the years, like a lot of other institutions. And I first got connected with a community college because my parents are immigrants from Mexico. They came in as undocumented workers, and we were a family of 8. So when I decided I wanted to go to college, it was Central Texas College, a community college that I chose to attend. And that's what happens to a lot of, especially historically underrepresented students. We choose to go to the community college because it offers us a place to go for our first 2 years and then an opportunity to transfer. The community college plays an enormous role with workforce development as well.
It certainly does. And it's getting more important in that particular respect. Well, now you're involved with the Communities of the Future project, and people are going to say, how are we going from community colleges to communities of the future? But this was a project that was launched by our colleague, Rick Smyer. And first off, what is the Communities of the Future project? And what is the link between what you're doing at community colleges and this project?
Okay, well, I have to give credit to the University of Texas at Austin, where I was employed with the president, Dr. Peter Flahn, as an administrative intern, and later worked with the vice president for student affairs because they introduced me to NASPA, which is an international student affairs association. And I met Rick there because we invited him to come as a keynote speaker for the NASPA Community Colleges division, and that I helped to create. So Rick and I connected on transformational leadership, and we have been working most recently in the last several years to work with faculty and administrators to help them understand what transformational leadership is, how that can be used to transform organizations and communities. So it's been a real interesting journey.
It certainly has and will be, I'm sure. Now, we talk about the educational systems in this country and around the world. We're not just talking about the United States, but really worldwide. And do you see that are the educational systems, we'll maybe stay in the United States for the moment, are they training or preparing students to deal with the challenges of the future? And by the challenges, I'm talking about climate change, income inequality. We're talking about, well, you're in Texas right now, and we saw that horrific power blackout in February of 2021 that took place. But I know they're giving them a certain amount of technical knowledge or imparting technical knowledge, but are we preparing students sufficiently to deal with these problems as well as to be professionals, whether they're in engineering or in chemistry or in social work or whatever it might be?
Well, I think that that's a question that lots of educators are asking themselves right now. During the pandemic, it's caused a major disruption within those institutions. We have done a good job at the secondary level, sending more students into college. However, at both the community college and university level, we have been not as successful in graduating, especially historically underrepresented students. So we have a way to go. What had happened with the pandemic is it made it very clear to educators that we can't continue to do the same things we've been doing and expect different results. What happened with the pandemic is there had to be a sudden transition into remote learning. And unfortunately, there's the digital divide, and many households were left out in the cold, so to speak, because they weren't able to connect remotely. And also student performance has been affected. The other thing that's happened during the pandemic is first-time college enrollment has declined and community college enrollment has declined. So what we're seeing is that educators are having intense discussions right now, trying to plan what's it going to look like to build innovative, future-oriented, post-pandemic strategies. I can talk to you more about that as you ask me more questions.
Why don't we go into it right now while we're in that neighborhood? Let's stay there.
Okay. One of the things that is clear is that we have to find ways to reach these students that are basically getting disconnected in education. So post-pandemic, there's going to be lots of opportunities. And what the thought leaders are saying is that what we really need to do is provide more what they call hybrid immersive learning experiences. And what that means is that perhaps we might transform higher ed to look like that these students are able to learn via remotely, have content that they learn, and then then meet with professors, possibly in person, to discuss what they have learned. So that's one option that has come up. Another one that's going to be very important is that we have to have a different way of allowing people to earn credentials. Right now, it's really inflexible. We think of the semester and semester credits and having to go the full semester. Well, that's changing because the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, community colleges were already offering shorter courses. And I think universities saw that as a model and started emulating that model. The other thing that's going to be really important is that we're all going to have to be lifelong learners. That's already happening. Education is not going to be we finish high school and then that's it. We can sit back or even finish college and not be involved in lifelong learning. So they're talking about how can we engage people in learning throughout their lives and have a flexible way of entry and then stopping and re-entry. Those are some of the things that they're talking about.
And they're very, very critical. Now, your university that you worked, or college you worked at before in Tarrant, that has what, 50,000 students, I believe, something like that. Is that correct? It's a very large institution for a community college, but that's pretty much typical around many places around Texas and many other states and in other parts of the world too. As we come out of this COVID, and it looks like we're moving in the right direction finally. It's taking us a while to get here, but we're moving in the right direction. You were talking about what's going to change. Do you think that there will be even a further retooling of the curriculum or whatever, or the way to communicate to students that they are living in such a society that's changing so rapidly, but it's an interdependent, it's an interconnected, it's a very complex society, and that they're going to have to go even a step or two beyond that to be able to deal with these problems and not just go to college for 2 years or 4 years or whatever it may be and come out and say, well, here I am. I know you mentioned about lifelong learning. That's very true. There's no greater truth in the world probably than that. So do you think that will be part of the retooling in the future?
Oh, absolutely so. And one of the things that we have to understand is where we are at this time. People are restless about losing jobs and not being able to find new employment at the level that they were being paid. They are experiencing poverty and homelessness. We have inadequate health care. We found that out through COVID. And there's also struggle against racism and income inequality. Those are all huge issues. And educational institutions, I think, post-pandemic are going to have to, and during the pandemic, are going to have to really work with communities, reaching out to them, going out to visit them, inviting them to the campuses, and explaining more about what's happening in our society, and that it's evolving, and that we all need to collaborate and work together for a better future.
Mhm. And you mentioned a moment ago about racism. You mentioned about job loss, employment training, those types of things. I'm reminded of a colleague, more of yours than mine, I guess, but a gentleman who was on my show several months ago, Dr. John Cobb from California. And he talked about a brilliant philosopher, futurist, and he was talking about our society is shifting from the industrial age to what he calls the emerging ecological civilization. How would you define that ecological civilization, and what does that mean for us and for the students, even more importantly?
I think that the ecological civilization fits in really well with the skills of a transformational leader, master capacity builder, because the ecological civilization basically wants us to look at a new way of living, a more sustainable way to live. And that includes looking at our economy as something that isn't just about making profits. It's not just about one bottom line. They talk about it as three bottom lines, and that includes looking at how what we do, including with technology and developments in artificial intelligence or robotics, et cetera. What is that doing to the people? How does it benefit people? And also, how does it affect our planet? You know, you mentioned climate change, Bill. And of course, as a Texan, you said we just experienced that severe winter weather, and it was pretty scary without electricity and without water. In fact, our legislature, our Texas legislature, right now is discussing what caused it, who's responsible, what are we going to do in the future, and what we are being told as we reel from that crisis is that we were 4 minutes and 37 seconds away from greater devastation. That is huge. And that's one of the things that the ecological civilization is talking about. We cannot sustain that way of living into the future. We have to act now. We have to change now. And educational institutions are going to be the leaders, because we've got the research universities that are already doing wonderful work. I want to mention the University of Texas, MIT. They're doing incredible work looking at shaping the work of the future, what we need to do to reduce income inequality, et cetera. So I think that the ecological civilization ideas are very interesting. And what they say is that to look for these major disruptive signals, because people right now want change. We've had the pandemic, we've lost jobs, we are homeless, we are having trouble in education. So people want to change, and ecological civilization may sound even more appealing these days.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you're involved in some type of a podcast, or you just have a computer and you like our show and you'd like to share the show or many of them with your friends and colleagues, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're talking with a renowned educator in the state of Texas about the educational system and how to be prepared and how the students are being prepared to deal with a transformative society and one that's interdependent and changing very quickly. Dr. Magdalena de laTeja is previously served as the Vice President for Student Development Services at Tarrant County College, Northeast Campus in Texas. She was a teacher, served as the Dean of Student Services at Austin Community College, practiced law with the Texas Legislature, and was an administrator at the University of Texas in Austin. Dr. de laTeja, this is so important. I want to pursue especially the climate change approach and the Black Gap. But you mentioned a minute ago about the master capacity builder. How did you describe a master capacity builder?
Yes, as I mentioned, I became familiar with the Master Capacity Builder Transformational Leadership Principles through Rick Smyer, who's CEO of the Communities of the Future. And I was intrigued with that because as a leader, I felt it would be important to understand how I could think about the future and be making changes at our community college within student affairs to help students be more successful. And so Rick talked about a transformational leader as someone who helps others self-organize. So it's not a top-down kind of leadership. It's actually one where you engage with others and you facilitate as a leader, groups coming together and self-organizing and collaborating. Collaboration is really important. And another key element is connective listening. So basically, as a leader, you learn to listen to others and find connections so that you can be able to create new ideas or new ways of doing things and new ways of thinking by linking these disparate ideas. The other thing is that we watch for trends and what Rick calls weak signals and emerging trends and patterns. And so essentially, if we were listening during this last year of the pandemic, we saw lots of weak signals coming through, lots of emerging trends. And we also saw people collaborating with each other. And what another thing that's very important, it's complex, it requires adaptation, and it's about emerging, allowing things to emerge through groups and being able to facilitate groups in doing that so that they can come up with more sustainable ways of living. So those are some of the principles involved with a master capacity builder.
And of the items that we've talked about today, the crises or the challenges of the 21st century that are becoming even more prominent, especially when we look at the blackout that took place or the power failure in Texas, we see climate change is roaring. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's happening right now, and we can see it occurring. We see that there is systemic racism in the United States and in many parts of the world, to be quite honest. We see that there are many challenges, and we're talking about training the students of the future. Do you see us moving from to more of a, well, bringing these issues into the curricula, and also working to help students prepare to work on these issues? But do you see us changing as far as doing individualized? I know you've alluded to that to some degree, but more of a, I guess, a learning facilitator approach as opposed to maybe a classroom setting and that type of thing. Are we moving in that direction?
Well, I think that we are. I actually Googled learning facilitator just because I was thinking, I know that into the future, we're going to need more learning facilitators and also career coaches. And I think that there's already people being hired. by the private sector. And I think that educational institutions will want to look at that in the future, is hiring and training facilitators, because we have an opportunity through artificial intelligence and technology and more personalized items. For example, I'm now wearing a Fitbit. And that was something that is new to me, because I know they've been around for a while, but I decided that that would be important for me to use. Well, we're going to have more devices like that that will help us. But a learning facilitator will connect students in secondary schools and help them stay in school, because right now that's part of the concern, is that they're not engaging in education. As to community colleges, I think we're going to need career facilitators, people that will learn about the emerging employment opportunities in their area, in their region, and then work with those individual students to get them ready for those jobs, to help them with their reading and math skills, but also with their cross-cultural skills, with their communication skills, with their listening skills, and trying to make connections with different things that they see, and also understanding that they're going to need to be lifelong learners.
They certainly will. We all are.
Yes.
Everybody on this planet, I think we should say we're all going to be lifelong learners, and we need to incorporate that into our modus operandi, so to speak. I'm sure your campus, when you were there, had a lot of international contacts. You probably had international students, many perhaps in Mexico, Central America, other parts of the world. How do you think this is going to impact? And now obviously COVID has shut down a lot of our international linkages and partnerships, but how do you think our future will be as far as linking with our friends and colleagues and professionals in other parts of the world? Because we are interconnected, we are interdependent, and you can pick any profession. It doesn't matter if it's architecture, if it's brain surgery, whatever. You have international colleagues. There's some international component to what you're doing. But how do you think that's going to be impacted once we get beyond this COVID-19 problem?
I think that's a great question. And of course, we saw some political maneuvering around international students, and higher education came to their defense. However, it's still been very disruptive for our international students. And I, like you, Bill, love to travel. As I have mentioned, I've gone traveling throughout the 7 continents. And the picture you see me behind me is Antarctica. And we were on one of those zodiacs you see there in the back. So I really like connecting with people from all over the world. I think it's a part of a valuable thing. And I think educators are going to see that they will want to reach out to these international students and invite them to come back and provide wraparound services for them so that they can be successful. And it's also important for our global connections. We have to be able to reach out, and I'm a real proponent of that. And I actually have gone to Salzburg to learn about the global citizenship and what that means. And so absolutely, I'm in favor of that. And I think our transformational leadership principles definitely allow, and so does the ecological civilization, basically building communities of communities of communities, as Dr. Cobb has said.
Yes. And even though we're talking about case studies really in Texas right now, these apply all around the country and really in many places around the world. These issues are not limited to what you've been dealing with. And of course, your colleagues in other parts of the world are dealing with them also. Well, let me ask you in our last minute, what do you perceive as our number one, hardest question yet, but what do you perceive as our number one challenge as we move forward?
I think that once we take care of the pandemic, because frankly, I think that the pandemic is our number one challenge right now. So once we are able to get past the pandemic, then I think our other challenge will be bringing the country together. healing. I think that we do have to take time to heal, to listen to each other, to find connections with each other, to help each other. That's one of the things I really liked about what has happened during the pandemic, is that people reach out and they've been helping. They've been taking food and water and also providing a place for the homeless, and so many positive things, helping out children. So one thing that I want to say is that I once heard that it's not important what you know. What's important is what you do with what you know. And I think that that's clearly what we need to do into the future. We now know climate change is a problem. We need to do something about it, not just talk about it, but do something about it. We know that we have homelessness and we need to do something about it. We know there's income inequality and that it's based on a corporate structure that benefits the few and leaves everyone else behind. So we know these things. It's time to act.
It certainly is. And now we must move forward. But Dr. Magdalena de laTeja, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.